Good evening. I hereby call to order the action session of the Board of School Commissioners for Thursday, January 28th, 2021. Would you all please stand and join in reciting of the Pledge of Allegiance?
To the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I will note that we are still operating under the public health emergency meeting guidelines pursuant to Governor Holcomb's executive orders and corresponding guidance from the Indiana Public Access Council. I'll remind my colleagues calling in to mute their microphones, please, when you're not speaking to minimize any feedback or interference. Mr. Mulholland, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Allen?
Present.
Commissioner Arnold?
Here.
Commissioner Pritchard?
Here.
Commissioner Slack?
Present.
Secretary Collins?
Here.
Vice President Moore? President Hawkins?
Present. Oh. Commissioner Moore.
Yes.
Good evening.
Peter Moore, I'm here.
All right.
We'll record that.
Excellent. All right. We will now adopt the agenda for tonight's meeting. Thank you, Mr. Mulholland. Reviewing the agenda, are there any requests for changes to the agenda as presented? Do I have a motion to approve this evening's agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All right. Have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
All right. The agenda is adopted. Thank you. We do not have any formal recognitions to make this evening, but I want to acknowledge the hard work of all of our teachers, our leaders, and staff to ensure a smooth return to school on January the 17th. I know that we have asked for a lot from our teachers, students, and parents and staff these many months. And we want you to know that your resilience and persistence does not go unnoticed. Also, I'd like to recognize our newest board colleagues, Commissioners Allen in person and Commissioner Pritchard on the phone for their first action sessions of their terms. Welcome. You both actually survived a long, heavy board retreat last Saturday, and I'm looking forward to working with both of you closely as we move forward in 2021 and beyond. So again, welcome to the board. So moving on to section 3, does any commissioner wish to offer any opening comments or remarks? Commissioner Arnold, please.
Thank you. I would just like to take the opportunity to thank those individuals that provided written comments to the board. We had quite a few this month. It's important. I think we all look forward to the day when we can actually be face-to-face to give comments. But I want people to know that the comments and the issues that you write about are issues that we grapple with every day. I mean, you're not telling us in most cases anything that we don't know, but it's important that we hear from you. And I just wanted people to know that we do read these as commissioners. We do listen, and we take what you say into account when we're looking at the work that we do. So again, there were a lot of comments, there were a lot of common themes, and very much appreciated. Ask you to continue in the current situation to continue to give us written comments, and hopefully soon we'll be able to take those comments in person.
Thank you, Commissioner Arnold. Does any other commissioner, particularly those on the phone, Collins, Moore, Pritchard, or Slack, have any opening remarks this evening?
I don't either. Oh my word. I guess the only thing I want to say is that I did recognize that one of the major common themes there was racial equity, and we want to ensure the families in our community that we understand, we know, we are working towards that, and we appreciate any opinions that they may have, any suggestions they may have as we begin to try to make sure that we implement, ensure all of our children receive an equitable education. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Moore.
Commissioner Slack?
Commissioner Slack, please proceed.
I would like to say the same thing. I think the common theme on those comments were racial equity and bullying, and I think it's something that we already are going to try our best to resolve with all of our kids, and they need a great education along with racial equity needs to be at the front forward of it, especially when it comes to our brown and black kids. And I want to thank the teachers for all their time and their hard work, and I know it hasn't been easy, but I appreciate their patience and their leadership, and especially with the principals over top of these schools. It's been hard, but we're doing it, and I thank you for it.
Excellent. Thank you, Commissioner Slack. What I do want is I want to acknowledge that IPS did lose a member of its family this past Sunday morning. The loss of children to senseless gun violence is simply heartbreaking. We extend our heartfelt condolences to the family and friends of the child's family, as well as the greater community grieving such an unspeakable tragedy. With that being said, we'll move on to the public comment section of the agenda 3.02. In order to minimize the risk of exposure for members of the public sharing the same microphone at the podium, we will continue to receive public comment through our online portal. The public comment portal was activated on Monday, January the 18th, and remained open until 4 p.m. today. The board received public comments from 11 individuals. These comments were shared with commissioners via email and are posted on in tonight's board docs as items 3.02. Moving to the consent agenda in section 4, are there any questions or requests to move or remove any items from the consent agenda? Do I have a motion to approve this evening's consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Any comments? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Excuse me, this is Commissioner Slack.
Oh, Commissioner Slack, please go ahead.
Sorry, I did see on there the general purchase agreement at Tune, and we have some questions, and talked to the administration and talked to the superintendent, and I thank you for your clarity in those things, but I still want to continue to look forward to that relationship. I want to still see more about that relationship in the future. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Commissioner Slack. I think we'll need to take a roll call vote. Mr. Mulholland, please call the roll, please.
Commissioner Allen,
Yes.
Commissioner Arnold,
Yes.
Commissioner Pritchard,
Yes.
Commissioner Slack,
Yes.
Secretary Collins,
Yes.
Vice President Moore,
Yes.
President Hawkins.
Yes.
Motion carries by a vote of 7-0 with none opposed.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Mulholland. There are two items in Section 5 board reports, first being item 5.01, our annual board appointments as presented in your materials. I've spoken with each of you individually with regard to my recommendations for appointment. This is directed to my colleagues on the school board. Are there any questions regarding our 2021 appointments that are posted on the board docs site?
No.
With that being said, do I have a motion to approve the 2021 board appointments as presented?
So moved.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any comments? All right, we'll do a roll call. Mr. Mulholland, please.
Commissioner Allen,
Yes.
Commissioner Arnold,
Yes.
Commissioner Pritchard,
Yes.
Commissioner Slack,
Yes.
Secretary Collins,
Yes.
Vice President Moore,
Yes.
President Hawkins.
Yes.
Motion carries by a vote of 7-0 with none opposed.
Thank you, Mr. Mulholland. Item 5.02 is the annual appointment of an executive secretary. You may remember we recently made this appointment at our January 4th organization meeting that day. However, since that meeting, we have had Andy Bernlohr officially join the team, and he'll be transitioning and to support the work going forward. Resolution number 7873 makes the appointment of Andy Bernlohr as Executive Secretary consistent with Indiana statute. This appointment would replace Mr. Mulholland as Executive Secretary upon approval. Are there any questions regarding this particular appointment? All right, do I have a motion to approve Resolution 7873 as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any comment? All right, Mr. Mulholland, please call the roll.
Commissioner Allen,
Yes.
Commissioner Arnold,
Yes.
Commissioner Pritchard,
Yes.
Commissioner Slack,
Yes.
Secretary Collins,
Yes.
Vice President Moore,
Yes.
President Hawkins.
Yes.
Resolution number 7873 passes by a vote of 7-0 with none opposed.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mulholland. One last minute item that's on the agenda is item 5.03, the conflict of interest disclosure section. Like I said, was recently added to the agenda. What I want to acknowledge is that personally, I did file a form that is on the site now acknowledging the conflict that exists with regard to my employment with Marian University. This is consistent with previous filings from the last 2 years, but just wanted to acknowledge that to the board as well and to our community and those tuning in as well. Commissioner Arnold, please. That's right.
And I would just like
Right.
I know we get a lot of believing that we're not being transparent, and so I would invite anyone who would have questions or concerns or want to know more about, because I know they're very in-depth and a lot of information. So again, I would encourage people who have questions or concerns to take advantage of the fact that those are open meetings.
Thank you, Commissioner Arnold. Great point. Well taken. Thank you. All right, I will now turn the agenda over to Superintendent Johnson for superintendent reports.
Great. Good evening, Commissioners. Thank you, President Hawkins. There are 3 superintendent reports to be presented this month. The first item, 6.01, is our school spotlight. So I'm very excited and pleased to welcome Principal Lauren Johnson to the podium to talk about the great things that are happening at James Wickham Riley School 43. So she is wrapping up the first week of having all of her children back in that building, and we're excited to hear from her.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you. It is a thankful Thursday, so to our IPS Board of Commissioners and our district leadership, I would like to thank you for this opportunity to share some of the great things that are happening at James Wickham Riley School 43. Tonight, we will go over who we are, our big rocks, some information about our community partners, and also the support that we are receiving as part of the TZ, or Transitional Learning Community. I do want to start out by acknowledging that at James Wickham Riley School 43, we dream big and achieve big. This motto comes from the fact that we have a history of alumni that have achieved great things, and we expect our students to continue that legacy with the support of all of our staff. As we look at our students and also our population, you will see that we are very diverse. We have approximately 75% of our students are African American, approximately 10% that are Latino. We also have a variety of other ethnicities and cultures, and we are about 80% free and reduced lunch. What that means as a school is that we have to provide opportunities that not only address multiple ethnic and cultures, but we also have to provide opportunities that address a variety of economic levels as well. And once again, our goal is that we dream big, we achieve big, and all students do something great when they are enlisted, enrolled, or employed as they move on throughout their careers and their lives. As we focused on building a stronger culture at James Whitcomb Riley School 43, we tried to identify some words or some phrases that embraced who we are and that would be evident throughout our school. So we came up with 3 R's: respect, resilience, responsibility. At James Whitcomb Riley, we do all 3. Our staff collaborated to identify these words and then created expectations for each R in different areas of our school. Staff members then volunteered to make lessons to teach the 3 R's in the common areas, and teachers have led the professional development and continue to be owners of our 3 R's. And we have a 3 R's rap that students have begun to memorize and know very well. And every now and again, Ms. Johnson will get on with her pom-poms, and we go ahead and do our 3 R's. James Whitcomb Riley in action. Who are we? We are a staff that uses a concurrent model where each teacher has students who are face-to-face and students who are virtual. Students are social distancing, and we are following all of the CDC guidelines, but we ensure that the learning continues, whether it's in a small group or a whole group. We've provided training for teachers on strategies to use, and also we have different resources such as rolling laptop carts that teachers can use so they're able to not only monitor the instruction of students that are online or students that are face-to-face, but what is going on in both of those areas. Our 3 big rocks. What are 3 things that we are focused on in order to ensure that our students are growing and achieving at high academic levels? For Tier 1 instruction, we have strong professional development and monitoring of core instructional practices. Teachers are constantly given opportunities to reflect on their practice and identify ways that they can provide stronger instruction for all students. We also have professional learning communities where teachers meet twice a week or more in grade level or content teams to plan and learn together. We focus on data. We talk about how students did on work or assessments that were done the week before, and then we also try to address any misconceptions that students have. Teachers are reflective and discuss how they've changed their lessons for that week based on what the results showed them. And then they plan for the following week. They have to identify the skills, the text or materials that they are using, how they are going to teach those skills, and then what checks for understanding or formative or summative assessments will they use. Then we also are very intentional with our coaching and support of teachers. We collect data through paired walkthroughs done by administrators and coaches. There's a strong focus on meeting the individual needs of teachers, and administrators and coaches meet weekly to provide online support. And I'm thrilled to say that our administrators all share in the instructional and managerial responsibilities. We are present in grade level team meetings, we are present in classrooms, and we all own everything that goes on in our school. We are a very close-knit, hardworking group of administrators. One of the things that has been a cornerstone of James Whitcomb Riley has been the strong community partnerships. And I'm not going to read all of these, and there are many more, but I just wanted to share a few examples of some of our ongoing partners that provide support for students virtually through different programs, such as our journalism class or mentoring programs, and they also provide financial assistance and resources for the school. I can truly say that I am continually being asked, Mrs. Johnson, how can we support the school? What do you need? And when I go ahead and say this is something that we need, I can guarantee you it is given to us. So I want to give a big thank you to all of the community partners of James Whitcomb Riley. But in addition to those that have been with us, this year we have also had some new community partners and opportunities. James Whitcomb Riley is honored to be a part of a One Book, 4 Schools program that was sponsored by the Malcolm Brogdon Foundation and the Pacers. 4 schools all read the same book. We had collaborative family nights In addition, we also had the opportunity to meet the author of Finding Langston, which was a thrill for everyone that was involved. That was what we did first semester. During our second semester, each school will continue with individual programs being supported by the Brogdon and Pacers Foundation. In our case, our school is being supported with our mentoring program, and they are also providing virtual college and trade school opportunities for our students. So I can't thank them enough. In addition, we have other organizations such as the Mason Consulting Group. We have a partnership with Butler University where our students have applied to participate in a journalism activity. And we are thrilled that we just learned that we will be participating in a program with Shortridge High School. And I'm a proud parent of Shortridge, so that's also a great opportunity for us to participate in some sports journalism activities. So our goal is that we're getting students to see and think about what do they want to do beyond high school. What are you, because you have to dream big because you will achieve big. Our Mid-North Food Pantry is one of our newest partnerships. One of our current principals was on the board, and when her term was up, she asked if I would consider being one of the board members. After reading and learning about the Mid-North Food Pantry and seeing how they serve our community, it was something that was just an automatic yes. I applied, and I'm thrilled to say that I'm one of their newest board members and have already begun to see the great work that they do in the community for our families. And now for our TZ Learning community. I am a little bit biased, so please don't tell my other former learning communities. But in our TZ Learning community, we are a very tight-knit group of professionals. We get support from our executive director and also all of the other support professionals through professional development and coaching. But in addition to that, we also have the opportunity, we also have the opportunity to serve each other. We are each other's thought partners, we are each other's biggest cheerleaders and each other's biggest challengers. We continually ask each other, how are you doing with that professional goal or with that goal for your school? How can we support you? And so I want to just give a big shout out to my colleagues. We do Thankful Thursdays, we do words of encouragement, we call each other, and this has been one of the greatest opportunities that I have seen in IPS where we are able to get together as groups of principals to learn and grow together. Once again, as I end, thank you for this opportunity to share how James Whitcomb Riley is dreaming big and achieving big. We are the greatest school in the state of Indiana. We will continue to grow. We will continue to represent IPS at the highest level, and we thank you for the opportunity to share our story.
Thank you for that presentation, Principal Johnson. I'm going to turn it over to the board for questions. Why don't we start on the phone here, and I'm going to do my best to follow some type of alphabetical order with questions. So, Commissioner Collins, wanted to offer you an opportunity first to ask Principal Johnson any questions? All right, we're gonna mix it up here a little bit. Commissioner Allen or Commissioner Arnold, any questions for Principal Johnson? Commissioner Arnold, please.
How many students and what's your grade configuration?
We are a pre-K through 8th grade, and at this time, we currently have 386 students.
And what's the capacity of your building?
We have the capacity to do at least 450 students, and when we are face-to-face, we are about 430 students.
And what percentage of your students are opting for in-person, and what percentage are doing virtual right now?
Right now, we have about, I want to say, about 200 students that are face-to-face, and the other 180 students are doing virtual.
Pretty even.
Pretty even, and in our younger grades, we see more students that are face-to-face. In some of our upper grades, especially our middle school, more students are virtual.
Thank you.
Christian, we all got kicked off.
All right, I think we're back live, commissioners on the phone. I think Commissioner Collins, you were speaking, or maybe I called on you to speak. Did you have any questions? I want to start with the commissioners on the phone. We'll go alphabetical order, and then.
I'm sorry. I don't have questions, but I do have kudos for Principal Johnson. I want to thank you and all of your team for your excellent hard work in strengthening James Wickham Riley School 43. You have unified this building. You've unified their goals and their focus, and I just say kudos to you and all the hard work you've done. Did you hear?
Absolutely. Thank you, Commissioner Collins. Absolutely. I'm going to move in alphabetical order to Commissioner Moore. All right. After Moore is Commissioner Pritchard, please.
No comment here.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner Pritchard. Commissioner Slack, I want to give you an opportunity to ask a question or offer any kudos to Principal Johnson.
Yes, I would like to say kudos to Principal Johnson as well. I think she's done an excellent job. I just feel like that the presence of the school is in a better condition than we were talking about years ago. So I am very excited about the work she's doing. Continue to keep fighting. Even though we had a disruption, I think that you're still going to do well with our district, and I think we can applaud you. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Slack. Just as a reminder to commissioners on the phone, if you could mute yourselves when you're not speaking, that would be great for audio purposes. All right, well, Commissioner Allen, please.
Yes, thank you, Principal Johnson, for that excellent report. I really love the respect, resilience, and responsibility, and appreciate all the great things you're doing at that school.
All right, well, Principal Johnson, I just want to say thank you for the presentation, and I've had the opportunity to watch you work and watch you command the hallways of James Whitcomb Riley, and it's a beautiful thing to see how you relate and connect to the students in the building, and so I just want to give you all the shout outs and kudos in the world for that. I also just want to acknowledge you flagged the community partners, and there is just such a large, just an army of committed volunteers that just love the children of James Whitcomb Riley and are behind you and supporting you. So that's so encouraging and as well. And I just want to thank each and every one of them for their commitment to the students of James Whitcomb Riley and IPS.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Johnson, for being here. All right, we will move to item 6.02. Item 6.02 is our quarterly finance update presented by our Chief Financial Officer, Weston Young, in an effort to continue to be transparent and regularly update the board and our community on the state of our financial affairs. This update is provided quarterly to commissioners, so I will turn it over to Weston at this time.
Thank you, Superintendent Johnson. Good evening, commissioners. Tonight, we're going to review the quarterly finance update for the second quarter of our school year. We're going to review our cash flows. How did we get from the beginning of the year till now? What are the cash balances as of today? We'll review some of the historical trends and the calendar year activity of our supply diversity spend. We'll review the current year budget updates and some of the 2021-22 budget development, and then also looking beyond that in the longer term planning process. I want to just highlight the rationale why we have done these quarterly finance updates. One is to maintain financial and operational transparency. One also is to provide timely financial updates to our stakeholders, and then also to communicate the progress and highlight new initiatives. I also want to, again, for the community and for the board members who may be new, there's a link at the very bottom where you can link, and it goes out to the finance page on myps.org, and you can review a lot of different reports, some state level, federal, and local in our reporting. We want to review the first 6 months cash flow. made up of our education operations rainy day and operating referendum fund. You'll see that at the beginning of the school year, we started with $96 million across those funds. You'll see that over the course of the first 6 months, we netted a positive cash flow of about $8 million. I want to highlight that that is supported by $18 million received from our operating referendum. So without that operating referendum, we would be at a $10 million deficit. We ended this 6-month period with $104 million in the bank, which is a little over 3 months worth of reserves in our cash balance. We're abiding by our cash balance policy of at least 1 month. The activity of the first 6 months really is highlighted from payments that we made up front for COVID-19 response needs. There was revenue decrease due to a decrease in enrollment, and then also billing delays with our transportation provider. We did have a bright spot where we had semi-annual property taxes coming into our operations and operating referendum fund trending higher than originally projected. The slide with the bar charts shows the budgeted versus the actual, and then a comparison with the prior year. There are a couple of categories that moved up or down more significantly than others. Two that I want to highlight are the innovation network payments. The network payments were actual for 6 months was $44 million, budgeted at $40 million. This is due to a number of innovation agreements that were agreed upon after the budget was approved. The transportation spend also is one that I think sticks out. $7 million of spend in the first 6 months, budgeted with about $20 million over the 6 months. This is due to billing delays with our transportation provider. Just as of today, you'll see spend occur in the third quarter. Today we just issued $6.8 million of spend related to that first semester. And so that will eventually, by the end of the year, be normalized in an annualized amount of about $35 million. Looking at the full year perspective of all the funds, we add in also a line called COVID response, because it's a fund that we are upfront spending money on, but we are planning on having reimbursement from a various number of sources. So again, we started with $96 million at the beginning of the year, and at the end of the year, have about $80 million. That's our current projection, with COVID response being about $18 million in the negative for this calendar year. Again, we expect to see most, if not all, of it reimbursed through some other source, but not in this calendar year. The highlight here is to just reiterate our cash balance policy. By the end of the year, we project having enough cash in our bank to have about 2 months' worth of reserves. So previously, it was the board appropriated funds, but now we're going to look at all the funds. A key number in this report, a lot of numbers, a lot of small numbers, but the key number that I'm looking at when I look at the numbers is the very bottom number in the 2021 6-month column, which shows a $28 million negative for the full year. This just really enhances why we need reserves and the cash balance policy in place. Again, enrollment shifts. We did have property tax revenues come in higher, but we also had upfront expenditures related to COVID, and also some reduced expenditures related to transportation and food service. Again, for the first 6 months, all funds having about a $28 million deficit. In the cash balances, you'll see, again, $160 million at 12/31. Note the expenditures in the other funds category is down to zero, which is where a lot of that COVID upfront monies have been expended. But when we've been spending, we report and track our historical supplier diversity spend. This is something that I think is critical as we are on a path to seek out our priorities for 2025 through our strategic plan, and that strategic priority on racial equity. We've been tracking this the last 7 years, and we see an increase this year of about 16 to 17% of our eligible spend being spent on minority, women, and veteran business-owned businesses. This is really made possible through two key initiatives. One was the capital referendum. There's a significant vendor that does work for a lot of the capital referendum work, and they did a lot of work this year, and we paid them quite a bit of money. So that's part in some of the increase. The other piece is when we spent money to transition to one-to-one technology and purchase devices. One of the vendors that we bought devices from was minority women business owned business. So those two key events, when opportunities have arisen, we've strategically aligned to spend with certified minority vendors. But over the course of the last 7 years, 12.2% of our eligible spend has been what we have tracked as certified minority spend. When we look at this year, we've highlighted many times about our shift to one-to-one technology and adopting digital curriculum, our social distancing, and also launching virtual learning in our learning hubs. But over the course of time, there's been a lot of uncertainty. And what I wanted to just share with you for this update is, there are a couple funding considerations that may have been outstanding in the past, and as of today, seem to be confirmed, and we have a better understanding of what to expect for the remainder of this school year. So one would be the FEMA application. We submitted it in September of this past year. We have more definition of what an eligible expenditure is, but we don't necessarily know still what the timing or the approval of those expenditures. So that's something that our team has been working through. And then also state funding. We've highlighted the fact that a lot of students in Indiana were virtually learning, and funding was potentially at a lower amount. Well, due to COVID, the State Board of Ed acted in the fall, and we're confident that the legislation moving through the State House in this early part of the session will confirm that 100% of the funding for virtual students for the February count will be at 100%. This is one that I'm putting in the confirmed category because we may want an asterisk on there. It's not final, but I believe it's one that has alignment across the House. One of the big outstanding funding considerations for this school year even is the passage of the federal stimulus, not CARES Act in March, but the federal stimulus in December. And so there's a lot of opportunity here for us to be planning strategically on how we address learning loss with our students. And this is something that is understood to be, for spend through September 2023. And then also want to highlight again an ongoing effort from the IPS Foundation to connect with philanthropy and partners of our district. Speaking of the partners and the revenue sources to address COVID relief, the chart on the left shows some of the funding sources that are addressing the $26 million of spend that we have projected for this school year. Getting into the budget development process, we're starting to think about, okay, how many of these expenditures, copy paste and roll to the next school year? How much are the social distancing requirements going to require us to have the PPE, to have the social distancing? We do know that the technology is going to be one that we're going to have to continue to spend to keep one-to-one devices current. But the funding sources to address that $26 million comes in right around $20 million. And a couple of highlights that I want to note. The CARES Act money, we did get an additional allocation, kind of a final allocation, which raised it to a little over $17 million. The FEMA, I updated as far as a projection. It started out months ago, probably around $4 million. And it went to $2 million in October. Now I'm bringing it down to $500,000. I think we can say, well, there's a decrease, but we also know there's this federal stimulus and talk of another one even coming. So at some point, right pocket, left pocket from the federal reserves are going to hopefully cover the expenses we have. Looking to 21-22, a lot of it is about continue the work that we've been doing in the shift to one-to-one technology and the digital curriculum, and really highlighting a renewed focus of our academic programming on literacy, preparing for social distancing and any of the scenarios that may happen in August 2021, depending on the community conditions related to our COVID response as a community. And then also, knowing that there's going to be conversations with our community, with our internal teams, and how we are going to tackle the strategic 2025 priorities. But looking at the revenue funding considerations for 21-22, we've highlighted the stimulus and the use of those dollars for 21-22, but we also have talk in DC about a potential third stimulus. And so just knowing that these dollars are one-time infusions is going to be critical for us to, in the long run, not inflate or create something that's unsustainable when those monies roll off. The other piece is state funding. As the legislative session has a biennium budget to pass this next few months, there's good news coming out from revenue projections. The last 7-8 months, that probably wasn't what I felt, maybe not what other people felt, but Indiana is a manufacturing state. And in this downturn, Indiana has been a bright spot. Manufacturing has driven revenues into the state coffers, and their revenue projection is much brighter than what originally expected. So with that, there's a potential for an increase in per pupil funding. And then also on the local side, the economy's been ticking along ever a bit slowly, but the feeling and the sense of our net assessed value won't be felt probably for a couple years. So right now, our real estate values continue to rise. But looking through the timeline, the conversations that our team will have with the board in the community, February 2021, we'll be having our budget appropriation development with the board at a work session, and hopefully spend some time with you there talking about the thoughts in more detail. In March, that is a deadline that we have to pass our appropriations, the authorization to spend for the next school year. And then over the course of April through June, in preparation for the school year, getting further down deeper with you and our team on line item budgets to tackle the strategic priorities that we're going to pursue in 21-22. In 21-22, we're also looking at what is it about our teacher compensation with the collective bargaining conversation we'll have in the fall. The last few years we've agreed upon a number of increases related to teacher compensation, and that's after 5 years in the early part of the 2010 decade that established no increase to the base of the teachers. Our vision, our goal going into that 21-22 planning session is to continue that vision and increase teacher compensation to remain competitive in the marketplace, to get good quality teachers and retain good quality teachers. Looking at a big key critical function of the state funding, the question is it going to go up? Is it going to be stable? Is it going to go down? That's something that will be decided here in the next few months. Most likely after the date that we have to talk about approving a budget. But projections show 1% to 2% potential increases on complexity. Speaking of increases, this is a heat map of just reminding the board and the community of the last biennium budget, the one that's funding this school year, when increases have been had by school districts the last few biennium budgets, it's benefited schools, districts that have lesser poverty, lesser need per the indexes. And so we're just, when we're talking with legislators, we remind them there's a need for equitable funding in steering away from the equal funding trend that they've put forward the last 3 biennium budgets. If that equitable funding does not continue, it impacts the funding that really relates to our complexity funding. Complexity is the amount based on need, not necessarily just the amount that goes to every student. And there's a complexity study that came out this last few months that highlighted the work across multiple districts, parts of the state, of what is being spent with the complexity dollars. And so what we've done on this slide is highlighted some of the programs and also some of the key positions that the complexity dollars are used to fund. Many of them relate to ELL, many of them relate to SPED. And we highlight on the next slide where we have those funding gaps in SPED and ELL. And those are some significant gaps that are funded by about 10% of our state revenue. SPED about $18 million on average the last 5 years, and $6.5 million for ELL. And in 2021, 22, and beyond, we're left with similar decision points that we've been talking about the last year. A lot of environmental factors around us that we may not control, but they're going to dictate, the funds coming in and the spend that we will have. Strategic conversations about alignment with strategic priorities, and then the COVID response. Many decisions and trade-offs are going to be talked about with the board around transportation and the facilities that we have. And so the studies that we have been, originally doing this last year will come to decision points, and trade-offs will be had. As we look out to the future, long-term budget planning has to take into account a structural deficit. And the IPS education and operations funds that are represented on this slide can go many different ways. And so we've highlighted just three. An orange line on the graph illustrates the cash balance without any decisions related to staffing or operations, and the potential decrease in state funding would have an impact on cash balance running out earlier. The green line illustrates a modest improvement in our cash flow position, either because of an increase in revenue or a reduction in expenditures. But ultimately, our goal through the planning process is to seek out that purple line, which illustrates strategic decision-making about expenditures to align with projected revenues from state and local sources. The key messages to take away is that our current short-term cash flow has been strengthened by stronger than expected property tax revenues, an expected legislative fix guaranteeing 100% state funding for all students, and a second federal stimulus. While expenditures related to COVID response and capital referendum have significantly increased our spend for minority women and veteran business-owned vendors, then in the next couple months, the budget development process will align projected available resources with our strategic priorities to sustain a long-term financial plan for the district. At this time, available for questions.
Weston, thank you. And Commissioner Arnold, to your point earlier about Finance Committee, welcome to the Finance Committee, right? But really appreciate the presentation. For commissioners on the phone, we're going to go back to our alphabetical order. Question, thoughts, and certainly feel free to pass, but want to start again with Commissioner Collins if you have any questions for Mr. Young.
Well, on the phone, we're a little bit of a delay, and so I'm looking at, can we look at slide 13 for a minute, please? And there were some colored arrows, and was that just, can you clarify what those arrows mean?
Yeah, they're pointing to a question mark, which basically I'm trying to say we don't know that yet. It's not set. The biennium budget for the legislative session has not been finalized. And so we are planning with uncertainty at this point.
And on slide, there was another slide where it, the budget would be reconfigured as per the strategic plan. I think it was maybe, I don't know, maybe 16, 17, something like that. And can you clarify what that means exactly, and maybe with an example? Yeah,
so our strategic plan has 4 priorities. I'll highlight one, strategic priority 1. It is a goal of ours to focus in on literacy within that priority. And as I stated, there is a focus of our academic programming. So whether that comes from how we implement our recently adopted English language arts curriculum, the professional development, the teacher supports, the involvement with technology, adoption of digital curriculum for literacy, that is going to be something that we are going to make a trade-off of some type with the limited resources we have about alignment of our dollars with the strategic priorities that we have.
Okay, thank you so much, Weston.
Yep.
Thank you, Commissioner Collins. Commissioner Moore?
No, I pass.
All right, Commissioner Pritchard, please.
I do not have any questions. Thank you.
All right, Commissioner Slack?
Hello. Thanks, Weston. I did have a couple questions. So when we looked at slide 12, are we saying that our commitment to our teachers is going to be the same in that slide? I don't see an increase in our decrease, and so I'm trying to figure out what you're trying to say for that slide there.
What we're saying is that our goal is to continue something more than zero. And right now, the estimates in our budget projections are 3% increases. So what that shows is that the arrow is at 3 lines, and that's 3%.
The one thing I'll add contextually to that, Commissioner Slack, is obviously we bargain that contract with our teachers each year. So we'll obviously go in with sort of a target and a goal, but that's an arrival we come at jointly with the Indianapolis Education Association. And that as we talk about and think about our budget context, our aspiration and our goal has to be met with the reality of the time that we're in. So we aspire to do these things. Our budget context and then the conversations we have with our union partners will get us to the finish line on what we actually are able to do.
Thank you. I just want to make sure that our commitment was going to be the same to our teachers, or at least we need to, see what's the trade-off there. I didn't see it in the trade-off slide, so I want to know about that. Also, I wanted to know about, I want to say kudos for slide 18, or slide 8, I'm sorry. When we deal with minority women, I was very pleased to see that 16%. And then I also wanted to ask slide 9.
Commissioner Slack, we got cut off right there. Did you say slide number 9?
Yes, sir, I did.
Okay. Thank you.
I wanted to ask about the question there. You said that uncertainty. Is that what I heard you say?
Commissioner Slack, can you repeat that one more time? You're breaking up. We heard something to the effect of uncertainty, and I think, Weston, that might have been connected to the discussion about the upcoming or prospective stimulus. Was that? Let me ask Mr. Slack to clarify. Mr. Slack, please repeat yourself.
I was asking about the fee area on there. Is that get that money or we're not?
All right.
I didn't hear.
Yeah, we're not hearing you. I'm sorry. Did you say FEMA?
Yes.
Okay, FEMA, we're close. So there's FEMA in 2 bullets here, or 2 sections. So I think you're clarifying to understand, Weston was articulating the FEMA application process under confirmed or under the outstanding funding considerations. There were 2 separate FEMA discussions.
Yeah, so what we have waited for about 8 months since COVID initially happened in March and the FEMA application opened up was what is an eligible expense. And we're just now in the last month, in the last couple weeks, getting clarity on what an eligible expense is. FEMA typically handles earthquakes, hurricanes, tornadoes, the like. They have not dealt with a pandemic like this. So we are getting closer to knowing what an eligible expense is. That's what I'm trying to convey there, showing that there's been uncertainty all the while up until this time. What I'm trying to now show is that now we're still working with, okay, we have to file for the eligible expenditures now that we know what the eligible expenditures are. And then after that time, we do not know what the timing is of that approval, or even if they would approve those eligible expenditures. So that's what I was trying to convey on this slide.
Commissioner Slack, did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Fantastic. All right, any other questions from commissioners? Commissioner Arnold?
On slide 10, can you tell me what the gear grant is? It didn't sound familiar to me, but I probably should know. And also, tell me about the Marion County e-learning, where those funds come from and what exactly are they used for?
They're actually very much related. So first, I'm going to tackle the Marion County e-learning. Marion County e-learning is a collaboration of all the Marion County districts and all the Marion County charters all together have received money from a fund called the Marion County e-learning fund. You may remember in the early stages of COVID response, March, April, May, there was a number of significant philanthropy dollars that went into this fund. And the initial need that we had as a district and many other districts was we need to get our kids connected to the internet. And so, people heard that call and they gave money to that fund. Dollars were distributed based on need on a poverty metric, and IPS received about $250,000. That right away was already spoken for with the need that we had already purchased for hotspots. Now, Marion County e-learning fund, together as a collaborative group, the 11 districts and the however many charters there are, we all went together and applied as a unit, as a whole collaborational team, for about $17 million that the governor had available through the CARES Act. So the governor of Indiana received $60-some million that he had available to distribute to districts. And the gear, I think the G in there is governor. So at some point it's a governor emergency something fund. So the governor's grant, we applied for $17 million. As a collaborative group, we received an award of about $11 million. And of that $11 million, IPS received $2 million of that $11 million. And so the gear grant portion, that's right there with $2 million, that's our amount.
Thank you for that clarification.
And that one is restricted for technology and hotspots specifically. Unlike CARES, it's a little bit more open-ended, a little bit more unrestricted.
Thank you.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Young, for this presentation. On slide 8, you mentioned a firm that helped us out with the referendum. What was the name of that firm, the MBE firm?
Powers Davis.
Thank you.
And if I remember correctly, that was a joint venture between Powers and Davis and on a few projects to accelerate during the, I think some of the high school work as well as some of the first round of the capital referendum phasing, right? Okay.
I believe so. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions from commissioners? Okay. I was going to remember there needs to be a delay here before I move on to. So I think I do want to, first of all, thank you again for the presentation, Weston. I think these are critically important to anchor us as a community to understand exactly where we are today, but how we think about going forward. As as Superintendent Johnson shared earlier, I think if we go to slide 17 and 18, it tends to be where I live a little bit, and we look at sort of these critical decision points, but slide 18 is really that curve. And this is a slide that we have seen for years now, even going back prior to some of us who have been serving on this board, as we think about the operating referendum, capital referendum. And, to Commissioner Slack's point about teacher compensation, that is the commitment that we all aspire to. That's what we said we were here to do, was to invest in classrooms and invest in teachers. And so that requires some very challenging and thoughtful and intentional trade-offs that are highlighted in slide 17, a few of those bullets below in development. And so I just want to acknowledge that in order for us to sustain and maintain and even enhance what we're doing today with regard to investments in classrooms and teacher compensation and all those things, it requires those challenging trade-off conversations, which I know are beginning to be in process, and I expect certainly there will be much dialogue and discussion with our community there, but don't want to discount the fact that this is an incredibly important moment as we look at that curve, and we can never take our eye off that curve because of its importance. Because if we don't act at some point, we can see what happens there with green and orange. And one of the documents in the board docs is the cash flow projections, which actually, will provide the numbers associated with the bars and the curves and those things, and we can see what happens there. So just want to acknowledge that. I think it's always important that we recognize that we have work to do as a community as we think about the future of IPS. So again, I appreciate you flagging this in the presentation, and we got to stay focused on this.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Weston. We'll move to the next item, which is item 6.03. This is an update on the IPS police study that our team is commissioning. We know earlier this summer, there was a lot of attention on the state of policing and the relationship of police in schools and with the community. Our team did not lose sight of our commitment that we made in our efforts to ensure that we were reviewing and analyzing our policies and practices in the IPS Police Department. So excited for Ahmed Young, our Chief of External Affairs and General Counsel, to share more about the work that is getting underway.
Thank you, Superintendent Johnson. It's good to see you all. It's good to hear you all over the phone as well. This is a topic I take very personally. It's something that I've been connected to personally and professionally since a kid. And then once I jumped into the Marion County Prosecutor's Office many moons ago, serving as a deputy prosecutor and working really closely with law enforcement. So when the opportunity came to assess and evaluate and work really closely with the superintendent and the chief of IPS PD, I jumped at that opportunity to dig into what we've done well over the last several years and the way that we need to improve. Superintendent Johnson laid the context perfectly. Over the last several years, we've seen this uptick and at least the visualization of the nexus between different communities and law enforcement. Of course, last summer, and actually last spring going into the summer, there are several instances that brought this to a fever pitch to an extent. That provided us the perfect venue and the perfect opportunity and the perfect vehicle to move forward with a study of IPSPD. Before we jump into the past study that took place in 2015, just to give a little context about IPSPD, we currently have about 40 sworn officers. I say sworn officers because before an individual becomes a sworn officer, they can take the training and they need to complete that training, and they can be somewhat part-time officers as they complete that training. So we currently have about 40 sworn officers, 1 or 2 officers that are doing that part-time duty pending completion of that training at the Indiana Law Enforcement Academy. Unfortunately, COVID has affected a lot of different things. ILEA is one of those things that's been affected, so they had to push a pause button on the training that's taken place, usually or throughout the year. So once those officers get sworn in, we'll be up to approximately 42 sworn officers. We have a relatively new police chief, Tanya Gwynn. She's been at the helm since 2019-ish. I apologize for not having the exact date, but she's been at the helm for a little while, and she succeeded Chief Garner, who had been police chief for IPS for more than a decade. And we appreciated his leadership, but it was fantastic to get some fresh leadership and fresh eyes and a fresh perspective on what IPSPD could be and should be for not only our learning community, but for the larger community as well. With that change in leadership, she brought a new philosophy. And with that new philosophy, it was a shift from the traditional stand on the blue line policing to a more SRO-centered approach to what a police officer could be and should be for our school learning community. So we're excited about that new philosophy, which focuses on building up students, building a school culture, and supporting students and mentoring students. Excuse me. Also, how do we have a positive impact on suspensions and expulsions? How do we drop and influence that in a positive way? And also thinking through the development of students through the lens of social and emotional learning. That's something that's really important. From an external perspective, we have a good working relationship with IMPD. We have an MOU with them that establishes the jurisdictional boundaries for IPSPD and IMPD. Of course, IMPD covers the entire Marion County area for the most part, and we respect that jurisdiction. But when issues take place within our schools, we have original jurisdiction, so to speak, and when there are things that get escalated, we sometimes have to call upon IMPD for their additional support, which happens from time to time. We continue to grow and evaluate our systems, and that's part of the reason why we're doing this study right now. And I'm not sure if they're here. No, usually Stephanie Bailey is here in the back. She's probably watching as we speak. I have to thank IPS Foundation for their support and their funding of part of this study. So I want to shout out Stephanie Bailey and the IPS Foundation team in that. Another part of the funding that supports our work are school safety grants that are overseen by the Indiana Department of Homeland Security. We apply nearly on an annual basis for grants from them, and we get those grants and we put that directly into training and other supports for IPSPD. I referenced very quickly a previous study. That study was initially conducted in December of 2015. It gave several recommendations. It evaluated through the course of surveys and interviews internally for the most part, and they made a series of recommendations. And as you all know, going back from 2015, there's been significant change, not only change with the administration at the superintendent's level, but with the board as well as within IPSPD. So those recommendations didn't all come to fruition, but it's something that has still informed many of the practices and things that we are currently doing right now. And we're glad that we have that initial partnership with PPI, who conducted the 2015 study, and we're partnering with them again for the 2021 study. I'm going to jump to the current study very quickly. The current study started midway through 2020, and the methodology of that particular study is multifaceted. It starts with surveying students, particularly middle and high school students, and then transitioning to families, parents specifically, and caregivers, then also surveying staff members that we serve within our schools, particularly at the middle school and high school level. Then we'll also have key stakeholder interviews internally in central office, particularly with the chief, the superintendent, members of ELT, and other individuals that interface with IPSPD from time to time. Then we'll also have focus groups that will allow us to dig a little bit more into the perception of IPSPD. And there are several research questions that are guiding exactly what direction we're trying to go with this. And there are 4 in particular. I think there are only 3 listed. The first question is trying to evaluate the effectiveness of IPSPD, diving into some of the data behind our not only suspensions, expulsions, and student academic data, but ultimately how effective are we? And that is more qualitative, and that's the nexus between the qualitative and the surveys that are going out with parents and the like. And then also thinking through the second question, which is the student experience, and how can we evaluate how IPSPD influences student experiences and outcomes. Is there a nexus between the rate in which IPS students interface with IPSPD officers, and does that have a negative impact on their academics and student experience within the school buildings? Third question centers around something that we've talked a lot about and we're going to continue to talk about, which is racial equity. Are the policies of IPSPD aligned with the larger IPS policy of racial equity? And if they're not, we need to address that. And then the fourth question, which I had to jot down because I don't think it was on there, is what are the short and long-term benefits of IPSPD writ large? And that's something that we really have to digest. Does it really align with our current philosophy? And if the short-term and the long-term benefits don't, then we need to evaluate how we can continue to shift our policies and practices to make sure that there are tangible benefits to having a strong IPSPD within IPS. Then the future state. What does that future state look like? In 2 to 3 months, we would love to come back to this particular body and share with you all an update from that study and share some of the recommendations that came from not only the student surveys, the focus groups, and examination of the data, but ultimately how we're going to incorporate that moving forward. How do we address and change our SOPs, which we've done over the last year or two? How do we continue to think critically about disrupting what's been known as the school-to-prison pipeline? That's something that I'm very keenly aware of, so is the superintendent, and I know that you all have had conversations about it as well. So we're going to continue to elevate those topics. In the future, we want to make sure that IPSPD isn't a part of that school to prison pipeline. It is something that's building a healthy culture. It's supporting the development of schools that, like Ms. Johnson just talked about it at James Wickham Riley. That's what we want to be a part of, and that's what we're striving for. And that's the ultimate goal behind this study. And we're excited about coming back to this body to share those updates in the future. Love to take any questions if there are.
All right, Mr. Young, thank you for the presentation. Like before, I'll start with the commissioners on the phone, and we'll start with alphabetical order. Commissioner Collins, do you have a question for Mr. Young?
No, I don't have any questions right now. Just thank you, Ahmed, for your work, and I look forward to hearing more in 3 months.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Moore, you're up. Commissioner Moore?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hello?
We hear you loud and
Can you
clear.
hear me?
Absolutely.
Okay, I'm sorry. So I want to say I've been quiet all evening, so this must have been the one I was supposed to speak on. I want to first say that it's difficult. It's kind of difficult to hear what Ahmed was saying, but I wanted to let him know that I do appreciate everything they have been doing in there. I think it was on his slide number 4 or 5 where he says our new philosophy. I think what we really meant is, I hope that's what we really meant, was our enhanced philosophy, right? Because this is not new for us. We want to treat all of our children fairly and equitable. We want to make sure that our black and brown children are not being disciplined more severely than others for the same type of activities, right? See, it said new philosophy. That's not a new philosophy. Is that correct? Or did I misunderstand?
I would agree with that sentiment. I would also say that within the IPS Police Department, there are things that we need to continue to evaluate and assess, and not only evaluate and assess, but correct and make even and make better than what it's been over the years. So I agree with you 100%. But when I hone specifically into IPSPD, I think there is a mindset shift that is taking place, and we need to push that further and faster.
Okay, so my next question, I see his mouth moving on the screen, but I don't hear anything come through the phone. So I guess my next question is that early on throughout the year when we first started talking about what we wanted and what we were looking for in 2020, one of the things that I said I wanted to do was ensure that our young children understood their rights for civil rights. You know what I'm saying? Be able to advocate for themselves. So I saw where we had things that we're going to be doing up in this upcoming years, considering the fact that we're at home, gives us ample opportunity to be able to implement some things that we couldn't have done, and be able to study things that we couldn't have done with children there, because we're going to have less, I hope, discipline problems. So my question is, are we looking at any way to provide our children with learning techniques about how to properly advocate for themselves? I mean, I recommended a program. I'm not suggesting that it has to be that program, but I saw where we're going to do focus groups, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, but we're going to do any training around for our children about how to properly advocate for themselves so that they can speak for themselves and still be able to maneuver and work throughout the school district and then assist themselves as they become young adults.
I love that idea, and I agree with you 100%.
Okay, so Superintendent, you heard that, right? So we'll be talking about that program we've been talking about for a while. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Commissioner Moore. Commissioner Pritchard.
Thank you. I could not hear everything that Ahmed was saying, but I am following the slides. Thank you for the presentation. I do not have any questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And Commissioner Slack.
Thank you, Ahmed, for the presentation. I appreciate it. I'm happy about the work you've been doing and developing on this. I'm also excited to see that slide 4. We were using 2015 data that we got and we tracked to enhance our program and our policy. I appreciate that. I wanted to know about, you mentioned the name of the person who performed this study for us. Could you mention that name again?
Yes, we collaborated with the Public Policy Institute that's housed within IUPUI.
Okay, thank you.
Not a problem.
And then I want to know, has any other district been doing any framework around their police department as well? And the reason why I ask that is because I want to know if there's any other information and data that we can draw from other districts, and have you been collaborating with other districts as well? Maybe that's another scenario. Then not we're only fighting for our kids, we're fighting for all kids to be treated fair. And if we're using IPD, then then we need to be effective. Everyone needs to collaborate together. Could you answer that one for me?
Yeah, I appreciate that question. So on the first part of the question, I can't speak to what other school corporations are doing with their security or police forces that are significantly smaller than ours, given their smaller student population. On the second part of the question, on a monthly basis, Chief Gwynn meets with other police chiefs throughout central Indiana and other parts of the state on a monthly basis to talk about not only best practices, but issues that they're confronting and other opportunities to share information, share intel, and grow with each other.
And my last question, I'll leave you alone. Since we've been doing this framework and changing and shifting our policy, have we seen any data points that say that what we've been instilling has be a positive thing in our suspension rates? I know that's one of our key factors. We want to lower them. Has that helped our relationship building with IPD?
I can't speak to that specifically, but what I will say is that relationship with IMPD is evolving in the right direction. From an anecdotal standpoint, given the fact that we can have several touch points from not only the mayor's office and then the chief's office, the chief's number 2, and then the district battalion leaders and the like, we have excellent touch points within IMPD, and that relationship is heading in the right direction. But ultimately, one of the things that the superintendent says often, and something that I believe deeply, is that our students and our schools don't exist within a vacuum. So the issues that they're confronting within their learning community oftentimes mirror the dynamics that they're navigating outside of the learning community. But our goal is to help them build the resources to navigate those issues extremely well. But back to your original question, I'm really, really excited about not only the collaborative nature that IPSPD has with IMPD. What's most important is the communication between IPSPD and our principals and our school leaders. That's where I've seen the most change over the last year and a half. Just the amount of touch points that the chief has, not only when a crisis is taking place, but just on a regular basis. And she's really intentional about those regular touch points. And I'm proud of her for that, particularly because when a crisis does happen, they know that they can trust and can count on what she says and what she does.
Thank you so much, Alvin. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Commissioner Slack. Commissioner Arnold or Commissioner Allen?
I don't have any comments. Thank you for the presentation.
Ahmed, thank you for the presentation as well. Just also wanted to, I think on slide 5, under focus groups, you mentioned parents and students, stakeholders, et cetera. Can you talk a little bit more about what does that look like, that focus group gathering?
So initially, we'll have surveys that go out to middle and high school students, a select number, and then we'll also send out those surveys to staff members and other community members. So that's the first point. The second part is sitting down, bringing a group of folks together, more likely than not on Teams or Zoom, and have a facilitator posing questions about not only experiences but perceptions of IPSPD. And that's not something that the IPS administration will be leading, but we'll be partnering with PPI to facilitate those conversations and then debriefing those conversations and informing our future steps.
Thank you. I think the other piece is, and you mentioned this earlier in your comments about, that this summer, the boiling, the temperature was rising, particularly as we think about law enforcement in the K-12 space. So I appreciate, our sense of urgency to really assess and reevaluate not only our purpose, but what is an effective, sort of SRO/law enforcement police department strategy look like within a school system. So I want to just thank you all for doing that, and particularly within the lens of our racial equity work. You flagged the policy. That's real. we know, as Commissioner Morris stated over and over again, the disparities don't lie. And I think it's just critically important that we do this work and analyze and listen to our students, listen to our stakeholders to really gather that qualitative and quantitative feedback and really align, all functions of our district to be aligned together in the best interest of kids. So again, I really appreciate this study and look forward to some of the outcomes and findings.
Do I? Thank you.
Thank you, Ahmed. We have no items in unfinished business this evening. We do have 2 items in new business. The first item, item 8.01, is the administration's request for the board's approval of reauthorization to invest in certificates of deposit. Weston, do you want to give like the 2-sentence what that means in real life?
We invest in CDs, and without the approval, we are not able to.
All right, so we're going to take a vote on that. All right, do we have a motion to approve Resolution 7874 as presented?
So moved.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Mr. Mulholland, would you mind calling the roll, please?
Commissioner Allen,
Yes.
Commissioner Arnold,
Yes.
Commissioner Pritchard,
Yes.
Commissioner Slack,
Yes.
Secretary Collins,
Yes.
Vice President Moore,
Yes.
President Hawkins.
Yes.
Resolution number 7874 passes by a vote of 7-0 with none opposed.
Thank you, Mr. Mulholland.
Thank you. The next item, item 8.02, is the administration's request for the board's approval of our fixed asset capitalization policy. I think I have the sentence this time, but Weston, you can see how I do. This policy allows for the alignment of our district accounting for all capital and infrastructure assets to meet the established GAAP accounting standards that we've transitioned to, as well as meet the requirements of the Indiana State Board of Accounts. Right, I got an approval from our CFO.
All right. So to clarify, typically our policies that we adopt sit for 30 days. I want to clarify whether or not this is a policy that requires urgency for adoption purposes or if it's a policy that can sit for 30 days as normal.
I would request a waiver if possible. We're about ready to finalize our audit within the next 2 or 3 weeks.
All right. Well, do we have a motion to approve the resolution 7875 approving board policy 6810 as presented?
And I would amend the motion to approve waiving the 30 days.
All right. I'm going to restate the resolution. How about that?
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner Allen. All right. We're going to start over. Do I have a motion to waive the 30-day policy as it pertains to resolution 7875 approving board policy 6810 as presented?
So moved.
All right. We have a motion and a second. Mr. Mulholland, please call the roll.
I'm sorry, President Hawkins. Could you reiterate why he asked for a waiver, please? We couldn't hear over the phone.
Oh, I'm sorry. My apologies. I was moving too quickly. Mr. Young, do you mind walking Commissioner Slack through that?
We are in the process of finalizing our audit in the next 2 or 3 weeks, and this is a function of finalizing that audit, and so the 2 or 3 weeks window would be less than the 30-day window.
Thank you.
So this is Susan Collins. So for clarification, we really need to wait a little longer for the audit to be finished. Is that correct?
We would,
so-
we would potentially have an audit delayed because of the waiver not being allowed.
Yeah, so Commissioner Collins, Weston is requesting a waiver in order to accelerate the policy implementation that will allow the audit to be finalized and submitted and all the other processes that happen on time, as opposed to delaying that. Yeah, so this is moving the audit along.
All right.
Yeah. I'm saying that correctly.
So that's
Correct.
just the opposite of what I thought it was.
Well, I appreciate Commissioner Slack and your Commissioner Collins' clarification on that. I blew right through comment, so I apologize for that.
So point of order, are we voting?
Thank you.
Are we voting
Thank
to waive the 30-day and pass it in one motion, or are we voting to waive in one motion and then approve in the second motion?
We have a single motion on the table, which is a motion to waive the 30-day waiting period for policy approval and approve Resolution 7875 approving Board Policy 6110 as presented. So a single motion.
Thank you for the clarification.
Yes, and that motion is on the table and has been moved and seconded.
And we have had some discussion, so I think at this point then, Mr. Mulholland, please call the roll.
Commissioner Allen,
Yes.
Commissioner Arnold,
Yes.
Commissioner Pritchard,
Yes.
Commissioner Slack,
Yes.
Secretary Collins,
Yes.
Vice President Moore,
Yes.
President Hawkins.
Yes. Motion-
Resolution number 7875 approving Board Policy 6810 passes by a vote of 7-0 with none opposed.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mulholland. The motion carries. I appreciate it. I'm jumping ahead of myself a little bit there. Closing comments, section 9.01. Does any commissioner wish to offer any closing comments? I see Commissioner Arnold's hand up first, so please.
Actually, I have two. I have comments and then I have a memorial to read. Do you want me to wait till the end for the memorial and give my,
Yeah, that'd be great.
okay.
Thank you.
So for my comments, I'd just like to echo President Hawkins' comments and welcome our two new board members to their first official board action session. With changes at the national, state, and even our own governing body leadership, we are poised to address educational challenges for all of our students. As we continue to mitigate the impact of the COVID pandemic on our students, we must also pursue improved academic performance at every school for every student. I hope as a board that we will actively seek more authentic engagement with all of our stakeholders. I encourage my fellow commissioners to review our practices and procedures for individuals seeking to address our board. In addition, it's imperative that we explore increased accessibility and genuine dialogue with all of our communities. There is no doubt that there will be a need for some difficult decisions in the coming months. We must listen to the voices that will be impacted by our actions. Our decisions will certainly not please everyone, but I have absolute confidence that as commissioners, we will always keep racial equity and the needs of students as our highest priorities. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Arnold. For commissioners on the phone, I'd like to start with Commissioner Collins, and we'll go in alphabetical order, and then we'll wrap up with Commissioner Allen. All right, thank you, Commissioner Collins. Commissioner Moore.
I'm going to pass the ditto to everything that Diane said, recognizing that this upcoming year, 2021, is going to be a significant one for IPS as we move forward and try to recreate, reinvent a quality district that everyone expects to receive. Diane, are you going to talk about Mrs. Diane Wilkins, I believe is the last name I'm going to...
Yes.
Yes, Commissioner Moore.
Okay, thank you. Then I will not... Then, yes, those are all my comments. I want to say that I'm looking forward to 2021, even though we have a lot of challenging things to go ahead, and I'm looking forward to every family member, every community to come out and make sure that their voices are heard so we can make the correct decision for those of you who we represent. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Moore. Commissioner Pritchard.
Just want to say thank you to Commissioner Arnold and others for welcoming myself and other new Commissioner Allen to the board. Appreciate it, and I'm looking forward to it. Thank you. No other comments.
Thank you, Commissioner Pritchard. Commissioner Slack.
I want to say the same thing that Commissioner Arnold has addressed about equity and the tough decisions that we have lying ahead of us. And I'm hoping that we can do this together and always getting our stakeholders involved and making sure that we listen to every last one of them and we make the correct decisions that we have to make going forward, especially financially. I thank Weston for everything he's done, putting this presentation together and trying to keep us on the ball. I thank our teachers, our staff, our leadership, our administration for all the tireless work they have done. And we keep on trucking, do the best we can. Thank you, guys, and welcome to our new commissioners.
Thank you, Commissioner Slack. Commissioner Allen.
Yes, President Hawkins, I want to just say thank you to Commissioner Arnold and to the team at IPS for welcoming us with warm hearts, particularly the executive leadership team for all of the wonderful presentations me and my colleague, Commissioner Pritchard, received as we transition to this role. It's been extremely I wore blue today, not because I wanted to dress like President Hawkins, but today is now, this month is National Human Trafficking Awareness Month, and the color is blue. So I ask that if you're not familiar with the signs of human trafficking, that you do become accustomed to what are the triggers and warning signs for human trafficking. And particularly like to thank all of the parents and families that have emailed and communicated their concerns to us as commissioners. It does not go unnoticed. Particularly, I believe I received an email from Ms. Robinson. Thank you for taking time out of your schedule to share your sentiments with us.
Thank you, Commissioner Allen. And again, I'm going to echo the echoes, right? And just welcome again, Commissioners Pritchard and Allen to the board. We look forward to spending many, many, many hours together as we navigate collectively with our community some of the discussion topics that we've already had and that commissioners have remarked upon. So looking forward to that. And again, do want to acknowledge that our next scheduled meeting, that was Superintendent Johnson for comments.
Yeah,
Okay, let me reset that again. Before superintendent comments, Commissioner Arnold.
Yes, I'd like to read a memorial to Ann Grissom Wilkins. Whereas Ann Grissom Wilkins served the Indianapolis Public Schools for 14 years from 1995 to 2009. Whereas her many years of dedicated service, calm demeanor, and unwavering commitment to educating children contributed positively and significantly to the Indianapolis Public School District as a whole, and specifically the students and staff members of the Emmerich Manual High School from 1999 to 1997, Arlington High School 1997 to 1999, Francis Parker 1999 to 2000, Frederick Douglass Middle School 2000 to 2002, George Buck Elementary from 2002 to 2008, and T.C. Steele Elementary 2008 to 2009. Now therefore be it resolved by the Board of School Commissioners of the City of Indianapolis that the death of Ann Grissom Wilkins be memorialized and that a copy of this memorial be sent to the members of her family. Ann Grissom Wilkins worked as an exemplary elementary educator and taught home economics in high school over her 14-year professional career. She was genuine, firm, fair, and consistent. She held high expectations for her students and thought of them as her own. Her students, peers, and supervisors held her in high esteem. Ann Grissom Wilkins left the IPS classroom in 2009 and became the president of the Indianapolis Education Association, the collective bargaining union for IPS. As the union president, she continued excellent relationships with the IPS administration, staff, and the Board of Commissioners. She served as IEA president from 2009 to 2013. In 2013, Ann became the Indiana State Teachers Association UniServe Director, Unit 15, for IEA as the union liaison with IPS. She continued to be encouraging, compassionate, and professional in building relations. Ann Grissom Wilkins will be sorely missed by her former students, past colleagues, and the IPS family. She was a respected member of the Tau chapter of the National Sorority of Phi Delta Kappa, Inc. May her memory be a blessing to all.
Thank you, Commissioner Arnold. Commissioner Allen.
Yes, I'd like to read a memorial to Marcia Johnson. Whereas Marcia Johnson served the Indianapolis Public Schools for 38 years, 1 month, and 16 days. Whereas her many years of dedicated service, calm demeanor, and unwavering commitment to educating children contribute positively and significantly to the Indianapolis Public School District as a whole, and especially to the students and staff members of Eleanor Skellin Elementary School, number 34, through 1982 and 1983, William McKinley Elementary, number 39, 1983 to 2014, Carl Weidel Elementary School, number 79, 2014 to 2020. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Board of School Commissioners of the City of Indianapolis that the death of Marcia Johnson be memorialized and that a copy of this memorial be sent to the members of her family. Marcia Johnson worked as an exemplary educator, taught grades kindergarten through 5th grade over her 38-year professional career. She was genuine, firm, fair, and consistent. She held high expectations for her students and thought of them as her own. Her students, peers, and supervisors held her in high esteem. Marcia Johnson was respected and valued by the staff at Carl Weidel Elementary, School number 79, for her devotion to the profession of teaching. She spent many hours after school and some Saturdays grading papers, planning lessons, and coming up with creative ways to engage her students. Her colleagues greatly appreciated her supportive manner. She was always willing to share ideas and give words of encouragement. You never had to wonder if Marcia had your back. She did. Whether you were new to the building, new to a grade level, or a seasoned professional, Marcia was compassionate, caring, and loyal. Marcia had recently served as the building sponsor of the St. Florence Firefighters Program at School number 79, which was an after-school leadership development program for students grades 4 through 6. Marcia will also be remembered for her sense of style and her deep, abiding love that she had for her family. Marcia will be greatly missed by her former students, past colleagues from Eleanor Skellin Elementary School, number 34, where she taught her first year, as well as William McKinley Elementary School, number 39, where she taught for 31 years. She will be greatly missed by the students and staff members at the Carl Weidel Elementary School, number 79, where she taught the past 6 years, as well as the entire Indianapolis Public School District. May her memory be a blessing.
Thank you, Commissioner Allen, for those words. Now I'll hand over the agenda to Superintendent Johnson.
Thank you, President Hawkins, and thank you, commissioners, for those memorials. We certainly send our condolences for all their families and loved ones. On Monday night, I was able to attend the city championship game at Arsenal Tech High School, who hosted. So I wanted to take a moment to recognize and celebrate our Crispus Attucks basketball teams who both played in those championship games. Our varsity team was runner-up in an incredibly hard-fought game, but our junior varsity team was able to bring home the trophy as winners of the city championship. So congratulations to both of those teams on their hard work, and we look forward to seeing our varsity team make a comeback with Cathedral in sectionals. I know they are focused on that. I'm also pleased to share that IPS is a partner with Heart On Educational Institute, who yesterday was highlighted by the state of Indiana for having earned 2 state-certified Earn and Learn healthcare programs. These are programs that will continue to strengthen the opportunities in the healthcare pathways for our students at Tech and at Attucks. Students enrolled in this program will be able to earn up to 40 college credits toward an associate's degree at Ivy Tech Community College while still in high school. They'll also be able to earn up to 7 industry-valued certifications in healthcare. They'll also be able to work in paid positions with various long-term care and home health care companies. And then a select cohort of those students will be admitted to the IU Health Fellowship that will take students into the medical assisting program and lead them into career opportunities at IU Health. So we are beyond excited to have excellent partners in the work we're doing to be sure our kids have access to really wonderful post-secondary opportunities. So congrats to all of our partners on the work that's been done and to our post-secondary readiness team under Dr. Morgan's leadership. I'd also like to remind our families that the round 1 deadline for our choice school application process through Enroll Indy is tomorrow. So if you have not yet completed that application and you are the parent or guardian of a 6th or 8th grader, please be sure that you go online tonight to complete that application for your student's school choice for next year. And then finally, I'll end with saying it's been wonderful to welcome back our students pre-K through 12 this week in our buildings for in-person learning. I've been able to visit 3 schools this week, and it's been great to see our students and teachers in action. At all 3 buildings, I was struck that you would never be able to tell that we've been out of school for so many weeks, and that really just speaks to the connection and the relationships that our school teams and our teachers have been able to build over what has been a very disruptive year. So I'm so grateful and thankful for all the work they've done. No matter where they've been teaching and learning, the work and the relationship has been built and the engagement has been happening. So we're excited to see our community positivity rates going down so we can hopefully keep our children in our school buildings for as long as possible. That will be it for me this evening. Thank you, President Hawkins.
All right, thank you, Superintendent Johnson. So our next scheduled meeting will be our work session on Tuesday, February 16th at 6 p.m. We're waiting on the confirmation, but we're tentatively scheduled to be held, that meeting to be held at James Whitcomb Riley School 43. So I'm not sure if Principal Johnson's still here or not, but at any rate, having completed all the items on the agenda, this meeting stands adjourned.